Out of the unknown into the image of man, this is the miraculous story of the first 9 months of human life. In this short span of time, life develops out of a cushion by the sperm which comes from the father. This photomicrograph shows some of the thousands of sperms run towards the egg in an attempt to unite with it. Only one will penetrate its outer wall and begin the creation of a new life. The successful sperm quiets down as it enters the egg and achieves fertilization. All latecomers, like this one, spend their energy in vain and eventually die. Thus, before our eyes, a new life is being initiated. We shall observe the fertilized egg during the 9 months of development in the mother's womb. When the male and female elements have united, a great activity begins. The fertilized egg divides into 2 cells, and these in turn become 4, and this will go on until there are some 200 billion cells in the human body by the time of birth. In this even more highly magnified electron microphotograph, we can actually see the cell division. Watch the chromosomes as they break apart to carry the characteristics of the parent cell to the next pair. While the early divisions are taking place, the egg moves to a suitable spot in the uterus. This trip takes up 8 or 10 days of life, and during this time the cells multiply into a solid mass which quickly hollows out into a little ball. Now a special layer forms on the outer surface of the little ball of cells called the trophoblast. The cells of this layer have the ability to dissolve any tissues with which they come in contact, and they make a small hollow place in the wall of the uterus where the growing egg becomes lodged. For a few days they also provide a little nourishment. By the 12th day, the egg has been firmly implanted. Meanwhile, further changes have occurred. On one side, 2 new cavities have developed and are separated by a wall. As the cells further multiply, this wall thickens. Only this thickening wall between the cavities will make a human being. This is the embryonic disc. At the same time, 2 larger cavities take shape around the embryonic disc. Out of the outer cavity, represented in white on the screen, a water sac will form, which will envelop the entire embryo and act as shock absorber during pregnancy. The lower sac, called the yolk sac, has only a temporary feeding function and will soon disappear. Thus, having assured its safety, the embryo is ready for the next step. Cells begin to specialize. After about 2 weeks, some cells condense and form small masses known as blood islands. The outer cells gradually form tubes within which blood will circulate. The inner cells of these islands form the earliest blood corpuscles. Blood vessels form in the embryonic disc, the yolk sac, and the protective wall simultaneously. They unite and establish a circulation through the emerging heart muscle. While still far away from a completely developed heart, it begins to twitch again and again until it develops its rhythm. It will have to continue to beat until the end of life. This photograph shows such a heart beating in an embryo. The mother's blood brings hormones, vitamins, minerals, and everything the embryo needs to grow. They pass from it through the trophoblast into the blood vessels of the embryo. In return, waste products of the embryo pass through the trophoblast into the mother's blood. Mother's blood never mixes with the blood of the embryo. At the same time, the nervous system begins to emerge. First, a small groove appears on the embryonic plate. By the 18th day, this groove deepens. By the 20th day, small nodules arise at the sides of the neural tube. This neural tube will develop into the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves as the embryo matures. But let's go back and see another important inner structure taking shape, the food canal. The pocket under the embryo's brain will eventually become the mouth. Below it emerges the digestive system. At the end of 5 weeks, the tiny egg has arrived at the threshold of humanity. It is 1/8 of an inch long, about the size of a thumbtack, with the beginnings of a brain and a spinal cord, stomach and intestines, eyes and ears, buds for arms and legs, and a primitive heart that pumps blood. But close inspection is still necessary to identify it as a human embryo. During the 2nd month, the main features of human form begin to show. The lower portion of the vertebral column, which at the end of the 1st month looked like a tail, disappears as the lower limbs shift downward. The neck gradually lengthens and the face begins to emerge. The arms and legs appear as 4 stubby outgrowths and begin to elongate. The hands and feet at first resemble small paddles. Almost immediately, 5 ridges separate out of the paddles, setting off 5 distinct fingers and toes. The mouth and cheeks take shape. The nasal pits move closer together until they form a broad nose. The forehead is prominent and bulging. By the end of the 9th week, the embryo is no bigger than a thumbnail and weighs about 1/15 of an ounce. Here the stamp of human likeness is clearly imprinted on the embryo. From now on, we shall call him fetus. During the 3rd month, the difference between male and female becomes recognizable. At first, the male embryo is slightly ahead in sexual development. This schematic drawing shows how the male sex organs develop. Starting from a similar group of cells as in the male, the female sex organ develops in this way. Both the male and the female fetus develop milk glands very early. In the male and the female fetus, the milk glands develop identically. Only much later these glands degenerate in the male, while others are permitted to mature to emphasize the characteristics of the individuals. The 3rd month could also be called the tooth month, for early in this period, buds for 20 temporary teeth appear, and the cartilage of the jawbone hardens around the tooth buds. In the face, the growing jawbone, the cheekbones, and the bone of the nose give contours to the oversized head and make it look human. At this period, the digestive system of the fetus begins to show signs of activity. The cells of the stomach lining start to secrete mucus. The liver pours bile into the intestines. The kidneys start to secrete a little urine, which is periodically expelled from the bladder into the watery exterior. Surrounding the internal organs are the bones and muscles which, with their steady development, further shape and strengthen the fetal body. No longer is there any question that the fetus is a living individual member of mankind. It is now about 3 inches long. While we have observed it in an upright position, the true position of the fetus is upside down. At about 4 months, counting from conception, the fetus begins to stir, to stretch, and to thrust out arms and legs. This is the quickening of the womb. The first movements are gentle and may be interpreted by the mother as the fluttering of wings, but soon the stretching becomes more vigorous, and the blows against the uterine wall are unmistakable signs of life and activity. Observe here how the umbilical cord leads from the fetus to the placenta. This X-ray view of the 4-month-old fetus shows how much he has developed. His head stands more erect. His face is better molded. His fingers and toes clearly separated. At the tip of each finger and toe, tiny patterns appear, miniature whorls of skin ridges, which will become the child's finger and toe prints. As may be expected, the patterns of these skin ridges differ for each fetus, and so at 4 months the human is marked for life with an undeniable stamp of identity. During the 5th month, there is relatively little modification of the general body contour. Now that the internal organs are well laid down, the skin hastens to attain its final form. The surface skin becomes thicker and forms a protective barrier between the environment and the softer tissue of the body. Sweat glands are growing downward from the skin, and at the base of each, hair glands are developing which secrete oil. The hair on the scalp begins to grow longer and heavier than that on the rest of the body surface, and on the fingers and toes, nails appear. In the milk teeth, the pearly enamel cap and the dentine are also beginning to form. By the 6th month, the eyes attain full development and may even be sensitive to light. Even eyelashes and eyebrows begin to show. At this stage, the mouth and tongue are covered with taste buds, which are relatively more numerous in the fetus than in later life. If born prematurely, the 6 months fetus will breathe, cry, and perhaps live for several hours, but he very rarely survives, and only in an incubator. It is a very weak flame that keeps him alive, and it is snuffed out easily, but this one lived and improved rapidly. The survival of the 7-month-old fetus depends, among others, on the development of the nervous system, which consists of a complex network of nerves connecting all the organs of the body with the brain and the spinal cord. By the 7th month, this system is sufficiently developed to maintain constant rhythmic breathing and to control the intricate mechanism which maintains body temperature. Thus, in 7 months, the nervous system of the human being has taken shape, a nervous system more elaborate than in any other living creature. The 7 months fetus is a thin, red-skinned individual about 16 inches long, weighing about 2 1/2 pounds. Odd though he may look, he has a chance to survive. The remaining 2 months are spent in fattening up the child's body. He becomes much plumper as fat is deposited all over his body, thus rounding out his contours. At this period, the fetus is very active. Periods of activity are followed by periods of quiet, as if the fetus were exercising and resting intermittently. What actually happens to initiate birth is unknown. Some think that the endocrine glands pour chemicals into the bloodstream to stimulate the uterine muscles to action. As soon as the infant is born, he normally opens his mouth, fills his lungs with air, and utters the first cry. The infant is still connected through the umbilical cord to the placenta lodged within the uterus of his mother. Only when the cord is cut does an independent life begin for this new individual. This infant is by no means a finished human being. His lungs at birth are relatively small and still need to expand and develop more air sacs. It will take quite some time before they are fully expanded. The heart gradually adjusts its beat from a very fast to a normal rhythm. Neither the tear glands nor the salivary glands are fully developed at birth. The newborn baby cries without tears, and his eyes still wander around, unable to focus. But he is ready for this world and makes his needs heard. The first 9 months of life are thus complete. Up to this point, the biography of this infant and of all the others in this room and this world are very much the same. This is the one phase of life which all human beings have in common.